Early 1966. A Marine patrol moved through dense jungle north of Da Nang, the kind of triple canopy terrain where visibility sometimes dropped to a few meters and firefights opened and closed in seconds. When automatic weapons fire erupted from a tree line the point man hadn't even seen yet, the Viet Cong squad opening up had every reason to believe the thick brush between them and the Marines offered real protection. Standard infantry doctrine on both sides treated dense foliage as at least partial cover against small arms fire, a reasonable assumption against most rifle calibers in most armies. It was a considerably less reasonable assumption against the specific rifle nearly every man in that Marine patrol carried. The M14 fired a full-power 7.62mm round, the same class of cartridge NATO armies had built around for exactly the kind of penetration a smaller round couldn't match, and it went through foliage, light cover, and the kind of brush a man might reasonably duck behind without losing anywhere near the energy a lighter round would have shed doing the same job. The tree line the Viet Cong squad had opened fire from didn't stay a safe position for long. They thought the brush was protecting them. They were wrong before the second shot ever left the barrel. To understand why the rifle that made that difference was already being phased out of American service by the time most of Vietnam's fighting actually happened, we have to go back to a design competition, fought entirely over a war that never came. The M14 emerged from more than a decade of post-war American rifle. Development aimed squarely at a hypothetical conflict with the Soviet Union across the plains of Central Europe, a doctrine built around engagement ranges measured in hundreds of meters, and a battle rifle powerful enough to punch through cover. Light vehicles and whatever else stood between an American rifleman and a Warsaw-packed soldier at genuine distance. Adopted in the late 1950s, the M14 fired the 7.62x51 NATO round from a 20-round detachable magazine, capable of both semi-automatic and, with a selector switch, fully automatic fire, though the rifle's weight and the round's substantial recoil made sustained automatic fire from the shoulder genuinely difficult to control. Attempts to field a dedicated automatic rifle variant, the M14A1, meant to fill the role an earlier generation's Browning automatic rifle had occupied, produced disappointing results that never fully solved the underlying problem. A cartridge this powerful, fired from a rifle this light, simply generated more recoil than sustained, accurate automatic fire from an individual soldier could reasonably manage. The rifle built for one war was about to be handed to soldiers fighting an entirely different one, in terrain nobody who designed it had ever set foot in. When American ground combat units deployed to Vietnam in 1965, the M14 was the standard-issue rifle for every Army and Marine unit that arrived. The weapon virtually the entire early buildup of American forces carried into the war's opening major engagements. That timing mattered enormously to how the rifle's reputation eventually settled. The M14's genuine strengths, range, accuracy, and the specific penetrating power that came from its full-power round suited exactly the kind of longer engagement distances European planners had designed it around. Vietnam's actual combat environment, close, fast, fought in jungle and rice paddy at ranges frequently under 100 meters, tested a very different set of qualities, and the M14's weight, close to 11 pounds loaded, combined with a 20-round magazine that felt meager compared to what a lighter weapon might carry, began generating real complaints from infantrymen humping the rifle through terrain. It had never specifically been designed to fight in. Somewhere back in Washington, a decision had already been made that would end the M14's career as America's standard rifle. Almost nobody carrying one into the jungle knew it, yet. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara halted M14 production on January 23, 1963, after just over 1 million rifles had been manufactured, a decision driven by evaluations already favoring the lighter, smaller caliber AR-15, design that would become the M16. That halt didn't mean an immediate replacement in the field. U.S. Special Forces had already adopted the AR-15 as early as 1963, and favorable reports filtering back from Southeast Asia built momentum for a broader transition. But the M14 remained in frontline Army and Marine service through the war's earliest and, in several respects, most consequential years. The M16A1 didn't officially replace the M14 as the Army's standard rifle designation until May 26, 1967, and even that formal transition took time to translate into rifles, actually reaching every unit in country. By the end of 1967, enough M16s had arrived to arm the bulk of American ground combat forces in Vietnam, but M14s persisted in meaningful numbers well beyond that date, particularly wherever a unit's specific mission still favored the older rifle's range and penetrating power over the M16's lighter weight and higher volume of fire. The paperwork said the M14 was finished. The men still carrying it into contact hadn't gotten that memo, and, in some units, they never would. The rifle's wooden stock and steel receiver, traditional in construction compared to the M16's aluminum and plastic furniture, added to the weight complaints while giving the M14 a reputation for durability that some veterans genuinely preferred, less prone to the specific jamming issues that plagued early M16 models before improved ammunition and maintenance procedures resolved most of them. That durability mattered in a theater where equipment took a constant beating from mud, humidity, and the general punishment of jungle patrolling, and M14 users pointed to the rifle's mechanical reliability as a genuine advantage, even while acknowledging its weight and limited magazine capacity as real drawbacks in a fast-moving firefight. A rifle that never jammed sounded like a small thing, until the moment it was the only thing that mattered. 20 rounds per magazine, standard for the M14, compared unfavorably to the M16's typical 20-round magazines as well, though the lighter weight of each 5.56mm round meant a soldier carrying the same total load could physically carry considerably more M16 ammunition for the same number of pounds on his back. That difference compounded over a multi-day patrol, where every extra magazine of the heavier 7.62mm rounds came at the direct expense of water, rations, or other equipment a soldier might otherwise carry. A trade-off infantry units weighed constantly as the M16 became more widely available, and units had to decide, unit by unit and sometimes soldier by soldier, which rifle actually suited their specific mission profile better. Every extra pound a man carried was a pound he'd have to live with when contact finally came. And there was no telling in advance which choice he'd end up wishing he'd made differently. This is exactly the kind of story this channel exists to dig up. The rifle built for a war that never came, fighting one nobody expected. If that's why you're still here, you already know what to do before the nenext one goes up. The trade-off between the two rifles played out specifically in the terrain Vietnam actually offered. The M14's 7.62mm round, and the older, heavier AK-47 and SKS rounds Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces carried. Both dramatically outperformed the M16's smaller 5.56mm cartridge when it came to punching through the specific kind of vegetation, light structural cover, and improvised barriers that characterized so much of the war's actual combat environment. A Marine or soldier who found himself trading fire through heavy brush with an M14 carried a genuine physical advantage that a lighter caliber weapon simply couldn't match round for round, at the direct cost of carrying more weight and fewer total rounds for the same load. That trade-off wasn't abstract to the men making it. Photographs from the Battle of Hue in February 1968 fought street to street through the ancient city's stone buildings and courtyards, document Marines still carrying M14s well after the rifle's official phase-out date, bracing the weapon's magazine against cover for stability during exactly the kind of close urban combat conventional wisdom suggested the M16 should have dominated outright. The rifle the Army had already declared obsolete was still winning gunfights a year after its own funeral, was scheduled marksmanship, competitions, and long-range accuracy testing. Throughout the M14s, service life consistently demonstrated the rifle's superiority at genuine distance, effective out to roughly 800 meters in trained hands, a capability that eventually convinced the Army to investigate dedicated sniper variants built on the same action. The M21, adopted specifically for that designated marksman role, and later the M25, kept the M14's fundamental platform in specialized American service for decades after the standard rifle itself had been retired from general infantry use, a recognition that the same qualities that made the M14 cumbersome for a rifleman clearing a jungle trail made it genuinely valuable for a marksman engaging targets at distances a shorter-range weapon simply couldn't reach. The rifle that couldn't keep up on patrol turned out to be exactly the rifle a sniper needed most. By 1970, only a small number of M14s remained in active use in Vietnam, scattered among units that had specifically retained or requested them, while the rifle continued serving as the standard training weapon at stateside basic combat instruction and among American forces stationed in Europe for years afterward. A strange, split service life where the weapon considered obsolete for Vietnam's specific jungle warfare remained, entirely appropriate for the exact continental battlefield it had originally been designed to fight on. Veterans who carried both rifles into contact rarely settled the M14 versus M16 debate cleanly in either direction. Each weapon suited to a different kind of fight, and Vietnam, unpredictably, offered both kinds within the same war, sometimes within the same week for the same unit. The rifle designed for a war that never came, never quite left service either. It just went looking for the war. It was actually built to fight. Squad-level tactics adapted to whichever rifle a unit actually carried in ways that shaped small unit engagements. Throughout the war's transitional years, an M14-equipped squad tended toward more deliberate, aimed fire at somewhat longer engagement distances, leaning on the rifle's accuracy and penetration rather than volume, while M16-equipped units increasingly embraced faster, higher-volume suppressive fire that let smaller elements generate more total rounds downrange in the opening seconds of contact. Neither approach was objectively superior in every circumstance. Both reflected the specific physical characteristics of the weapon a given unit happened to be carrying, and commanders who understood that distinction adjusted their own small unit tactics accordingly, rather than treating the two rifles as simply interchangeable tools doing the same job. Two rifles, two different wars, fought by men who rarely got to choose which one they'd been handed. The Viet Cong squad that opened fire on that Marine patrol, north of Da Nang in early 1966, had made a calculation any infantry doctrine of the era would have considered reasonable. Foliage offered concealment. Concealment implied at least partial protection, and partial protection meant the opening exchange favored whichever side found cover first. Against a lighter round, that calculation might have held. Against the M14's full-power 7.62mm cartridge, the specific rifle nearly every man in that Marine patrol carried into Vietnam's earliest and heaviest fighting, the tree line that should have offered real protection, simply didn't. A lesson written into the specific physics of a battle rifle, originally designed for a European war that never came, applied instead to a jungle its designers had never once pictured when they built it.